It was the Attorney General, so we loaned it out.
People that had contacted me about them, I don't know if anybody else went to that method.
Gonna hit
Really great.
someone, it's something in a brown rectangle.
Is it the doorknob?
Yeah. And I do a.
Fear not, everybody, we can still have the meeting.
Thanks for bringing it back, Drew.
You bet.
There was a warrant on it, we'll call him off.
Gosh. Be right back.
Yeah, that wasn't right. Me? That one. Sienna, we have to wait for a few minutes until it's exactly like that. Is that all right with you?
For the big cans at the bottom.
We're almost there, we're like a minute or so. You're not supposed to scream out. Okay, Miss Bessie Joe, let's go. May I have roll call, please?
Mayor Eman. Here. Councilmember Giles.
Here.
Councilmember Holmes. Here. Councilmember Nielsen.
Yes.
Councilmember Sowers.
Yes.
Please stand for the pledge. The flag is over here. We changed it. Thank you. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Council, before we approve the agenda, is it all right with you if we move the chamber monthly report up to the, above the public hearing, so that Sienna can get home and have her supper? Is that all right? Okay, super. May I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
The motion to approve the agenda has been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Consent agenda. Any changes to the consent agenda? May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion to approve the consent agenda has been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? May I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Sowers.
Yes.
Councilmember Holmes. Yes. Mayor Eman.
Yes.
Councilmember Giles.
Yes.
Councilmember Nielsen.
Yes.
Thank you. You're up, April. Name and address, please. And Sienna, of course.
April Whitney, 18 Knob Hill Drive.
Sienna Pale, let's see.
And Sienna's with me. Thank you for moving us to the beginning.
Thank you for coming.
As usual, when I come and report, we end up a little heavy on the marketing side of the chamber business, so I can answer other questions, but mainly that's what I'll be talking about. The Visit McCall magazine is on schedule to hit newsstands on November 1st. We're very excited about this issue for a few reasons. We're doing the ski area roundup. We're gonna feature 3 different experiences at each of the 3 ski areas. We're also doing a wellness and spa feature. And my favorite, once I actually got in and read it and looked at the pictures, is a story on snow removal and everything that goes into removing snow at the county, city, and all the private contractors who work on that as well. So I think you guys are gonna be really happy to see that in there, and it will, remind some people what actually takes place in the wee morning hours. We also have a new business roundup. And as anyone who knows me knows, I've been begging someone to open a Thai restaurant in McCall for 15 years, and we actually got Jasmine and Ginger sneaked in at the last minute, so it will be featured in the magazine as well, even though it's brand new. Up next, our Happy Holidays guide. We're going to be taking events, so if you know any nonprofits or groups who are doing events, this is the guide that we put out to promote what's happening prior to Christmas in particular. That's one of the chamber is always trying to target the off seasons and bump up the bottom a little bit in those areas, and the Mountain Holidays Guide is one way we do that. It talks about everything from pre-Thanksgiving right through the main holiday period. And so our chamber staff will be reaching out to the community members about that. We're also excited that an event that you might have been to last fall in an airport hangar, the McHalloween event, is going to now be a chamber benefit, thanks to Shannon Berry. She decided to put all of her efforts in that event and have the proceeds go to the chamber. So that is gonna be held October 26th at North Fork Lodge. That is a grown-up Halloween party, and should be lots of fun. And, a lot of our marketing efforts are funded through the state tourism grant and your generosity in funding the matching funds. But the office expenses and the pay for our office people, we do fundraise for and use business member dues for that. So this would help bolster that as well. Anyone have any questions about chamber things? Sienna?
Any questions, council?
Thank you.
April, thank you so much for.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Come on, Katie.
Bye, Sienna, thanks for coming.
You wanna wait?
Hi.
I grabbed her with candy in the car.
I like it.
We get ready for the public hearing. So the next agenda item is for a public hearing, and the purpose is for the public to present comment on the Westland Holdings PUD and SUV Division preliminary plot and associated development agreement.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council, Morgan Bisa, McCall City Planner. Agenda Bill 19-216 in front of you this evening is a request to approve PUD 1903, subdivision 1906, and the associated development agreement for Broken Ridge Commons. The property owner, Resolute Land Holdings, has applied for a planned unit development general plan, subdivision preliminary plat, and associated development agreement for Broken Ridge Commons. This is to be a mixed-use development to include 4 live-work units, 12 micro townhomes, a movie theater, restaurant, coffee shop, CrossFit or yoga studio, and storage facility. During their August 6th meeting, the McCall Area Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommended the PUD General Plan, Subdivision Preliminary Plat, and Associated Development Agreement to City Council for approval. You can see from the vicinity map in front of you, this is Boydston, this is West Valley here, and Rio Vista's here, and this red area is the proposed development. This is the Broken Ridge Commons townhomes. You may have seen these under development lately. This was the original plat from, I think it was 2006. When this was originally platted, these three commercial areas, so lot 1, or lot 2, lot 3, and lot 4, were required that these three subject parcels be developed commercially. The residential aspects of this development, so there are the live-work units, as I mentioned in the description, as well as these micro townhomes. Residential development is allowed within the community commercial zone, provided they are part of a mixed-use development that includes at least 50% of the ground floor in commercial or public space. So the applicant meets all the provisions of McCall City Code with this application, other than the one requested alleviation, and that is that the 50% commercial use be calculated across this development as a whole, rather than building by building. So if you look at the square foot footprint developed area for the storage unit, which is to be located here, the 4 live-work units, the micro townhomes here, the CrossFit yoga studio, the coffee shop, and the movie theater restaurant. It actually comes out to being 55% commercial and 45% residential. If you count these as all residential and these all residential. If you include the live-work aspect as being commercial, it goes up to 61% commercial and 39% residential. So you can see from the site plan here, there's proposed parking in front of the storage unit. They're proposing 14 parking spaces. There's parking for these live-work units. There's a garage, a single-car garage, a driveway, and some front parking for the commercial use. A parking area as well over here for the residential and commercial aspects. There was originally a proposed access directly onto Boydston here, which has been removed after discussions with staff and based on our access management policy. There's a development agreement that requires that the phasing plan, that the residential and commercial aspects be constructed concurrently, so that we don't have just the residential bits going in and then the commercial not be going in, for 5, 10, 15 years. So that is detailed in the development agreement. So as I was getting into with parking, they meet all their parking requirements. They're not requesting any alleviations from parking. They have 34 proposed parking spaces for the micro townhomes up here. They have 29 spaces for the commercial uses throughout here, 16 spaces for these 4 mixed live-work units, and 14 spaces for the storage facility. There's also a parks requirement for the 12 strictly residential units, or 16 if you count the live-work and these as well. The applicant has worked with parks staff and the Parks and Rec Advisory Council to come up with a proposal. Let's see. So there's actually, the city has public land from previous subdivision developments. We have a parcel here, and then it's about half an acre, and then we have a large parcel that stretches all the way back through here that the city owns for future park development. And so the applicant here has worked with the Parks and Rec Advisory Council to create a parking lot for public use here. So as the city develops this into, Kurt is envisioning fields for youth sports, having additional fields there, that there's parking spaces to have those types of events, soccer games, practices, and whatnot. So that has all been presented to the Parks and Rec Advisory Council. That was presented on September 18th and was recommended for approval. If, as the engineering and design phase of that moves forward and is unfeasible, there's an in lieu option outlined in the development agreement as well for in lieu fees of $15,000. This project is in accordance with our future land use map and with the 2018 McCall Area Comprehensive Plan, which indicates the continued zoning of this area as community commercial. This project also provides both live-work dwellings and micro townhomes, which furthers the goal to promote a variety of housing types and options. This commercial development also supports the future land use map designation as this area as a neighborhood commercial center, which help provide year-round employment opportunities. and as is shown in our future land use map. The storage proposal here, storage units are a conditionally permitted use in the CC zone, and conditionally permitted uses are also allowed through planned unit developments. So we have not received any public comment on this application actually, so I'm just gonna run through and show you a bit more of what it looks like if our clicker works. So this is an aerial rendering. This would be Boydston here, West Valley here, storage, live work units, movie theater slash restaurant, coffee shop, and then CrossFit slash yoga. And then these are the micro townhomes. So there would be 4 sort of 3-unit structures. There are perimeter pathways throughout, and benches and some communal areas up here, as well as designated open landscape space around the whole project. So here are some views from the perimeter pathway that's there now, as well as the townhomes that are currently under construction. It's a floor plan for the live work units. You're right, it jumped too far ahead. Okay. So that's a rendering of the 4 live work units. So I was just gonna back up and show you the floor plan of these. So they have a separate, or a sort of separated front area where you could have an office space and then have your living upstairs and then in the back. So it's separate closed off door, separate entrance, to have an artist studio, a retail, a little, any sort of office, law office, doctor's office. So that's what I meant by live work units. I realized I didn't really explain that. So these are the micro townhomes. They don't exceed the 35-foot height limit. Community commercial, you are allowed to go up to 50, but because these aren't a scenic route, they are capped at 35. And this would be the view of the CrossFit or yoga studio. Coffee shop. And the restaurant slash theater. So this is the storage facility, which has access from the exterior for some of these units, but also has interior access for some of these smaller storage units. These units are not restricted to the townhomes or the micro townhomes, but there are a lot of new residential units being built over there, and the micro townhomes don't have garages, so it is envisioned that several of these will be used by individuals from the micro townhomes for storage. Maybe I'm just too far away. No, or not.
The batteries might want to.
So this just gets into the landscaping plan, all of which has been approved by the city arborist. They're proposing native species, they're not taking out any significant trees. The area is pretty heavily forested over here and could use to be thinned. And so Kurt Wolf did not see any issues with what they were proposing to do. As I said, no public comment has been received. There are some outstanding conditions, and I will run through those. So the first is that these applications are contingent upon one another. 2, that prior to scheduling of the planned unit final plan and the subdivision final plat, that the applicant shall provide a revised plat which includes some of the items requested by the city engineer, such as control point ties from 2 separate boundaries, monuments to the city of McCall control points, a note on the plat that specifies the basis of bearing, that they submit digital files, that all proposed and modified easements shall be formally documented and signed and recorded with the plat, and that they provide a traffic impact study to ITD for review. Prior to any site work, so touching on that one really quick, this was discussed with the applicant several times. They are in process with ITD, and ITD has agreed to a phasing plan, allowing them to begin phase 1 construction and certificates of occupancy without a final traffic impact study yet. So there are conditions in here requiring that before they move on to phase 2 developments, and that's also detailed in the development agreement, that any improvements required by ITD, if there are any, that they would be either completed or financially assured before finishing phase 2. So prior to any site work or disturbance, the applicant shall prepare final design plans and have a stamped stormwater drainage report for review by the McCall City engineer. Any existing overhead utilities along the property frontage, other than the primary transmission line, and all new utilities shall be installed underground, and any future propane tanks shall be placed underground. Prior to issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall prepare final design plans and a stormwater report for the city engineer. Financially assure completion of any deferred public improvements in compliance with the provisions of the McCall City Code. The applicant shall receive final approval from McCall Fire for the proposed building plans. They shall receive approval from Central District Health. They shall receive approval from Payette Lakes Recreational Water and Sewer District. They shall provide light fixture specifications to make sure that all the outdoor light fixtures comply with our outdoor lighting ordinance. Prior to issuance of a final certificate of occupancy, the applicant shall complete all necessary on-site improvements, including landscaping, walkways, site grading, storage, as shown in their application and as detailed in the associated development agreement. They shall complete all sidewalk, utilities, stormwater improvements. Building numbers shall be installed in accordance with McCall addressing guidelines. They shall meet the mixed-use guarantees requirements as detailed in the associated development agreement. And that's the one that just says that the commercial has to go forward at the same time as residential, so this doesn't turn into an all-residential project. And they shall adhere to the phasing plan specified by ITD. A full set of as-built drawings shall be submitted within 60 days of completion of construction. Prior to execution and recordation of the subdivision final plat, the applicant shall provide digital files of the plat. And that pursuant to McCall City Code, the preliminary plat will expire within 18 months if they have not applied for a final plat or extended it. And that the PUD general plan shall lapse and become void if the applicant has not submitted for a PUD final plan within 18 months.
Any questions in order?
The applicant and their representative is here as well to answer any questions that you might have.
Yep, we'll bring him up. Come on up. Name and address, please.
Michael Jobs, our sales office is 200 Broken Creek in the Broken Ridge project, representing 2 North, Synergy Development, and Resolute Land Holdings.
Thank you. You can pull that up, or can you make that a little higher so he doesn't have to lean over, please? Yep, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity. We've been working hard with Morgan and Delta and the city as far as this project. We took this project over. It was a project that was originally entitled back in 2006 and then sat, and then we had the opportunity to pick it up and resurrect it. And it's been a battle. We're finally gaining a stride. And when we first started it, we were like reticent of getting commercial development out there because we felt like, wow, who's going to go out there? We're out here by the asphalt plant and everything else. We felt kind of lonely out there. But as we've proceeded, and gaining momentum and energy out there, we felt like, well, let's make this a community. Let's make it a neighborhood. So now we're doing very well with our community out there, getting people moved in, and we've got all our pathways in. We're starting to work on our landscaping, and it's been a work in progress. And now we're working with the commercial part of it, and we're trying to figure out, and we have businesses identified that want to come into there that we felt would be good for the community. And I'm a film lover, so I love film, and I thought, why the heck don't we have a theater here in McCall? And it's not a big one, it's a small one, and so I've been working with a group out of back east. They do these cool little theaters in small communities like McCall, that they mix the food and the beer and the beverage, and they have these small little theaters, and they're very successful, and it creates an energy. And I thought, well, wouldn't this be great if we could do that here? And if we could eventually have like a little film festival and bring more culture to the community. And then we want to get a coffee shop there, and we have somebody that wants to put in a CrossFit studio. And so we're just trying to create a mix of businesses, because that all creates energy. And our whole project is about approximately 11 acres, and we have pathways. And if you haven't been out there, go walk our pathways, because we paid a lot of money for those. and you know, they make a lot of sense. And that was another thing in the beginning, like I go, who drew all these pathways in here? You know, but they actually make sense. And I think a lot of the forethought of what the city and the planners have wanted, I think I'm starting to see the light, and I'm starting to get it, because it's proven fruitful. And so we're just continuing with that. And yeah, that's, you know, we're hoping to go through the entitlement process and get the approval and work on the architectural plans, construction documents, and getting our final plat engineering done so that we can start in spring. And just because of the short building cycle, we're hoping to get strong come spring.
Council, any questions?
Do you know what your sales price target would be for the micro townhomes?
You know, I'm not sure, but when we put those together, they're like under 900 square feet. So we're trying to get a different mix of product. And so I'm not totally sure yet, but it'll be different than the ones we're doing, because the ones we're doing are almost 1,600 square feet, you know. So these are small, and we want to do, you know, after living up here and working up here, I think housing is extremely needed for locals, and we're working on some other stuff to try to address it. It's a consistent thought that I have, but it'll be a different price point, a lower price point.
That's great, because housing is our number one priority for our workforce. So we're all about that, so that's wonderful that you're considering it. Now, will regular people be able to go to the movies there if you have to go to the
Oh,
movies?
absolutely. This whole thing is not just for the people in Broken Ridge. This whole thing is designed for the community. So, you know, we're hoping we get, you know, I'm scared a little bit, because, you know, in McCall, these big ideas, you know, they're a little scary, because financially they're big commitments. But I'm really hoping that it's an asset to the community, because it needs to be an asset to the whole community, not just to our neighborhood. Our neighborhood, it just happens to be located next to this and can enjoy the benefits of walking over and things like that, but I hope the whole community can get involved.
Well, people are hungry for a theater, and the Alpine Playhouse is always packed. I hosted a women's film festival in my backyard and had 35 people.
Wow,
So,
yeah,
I mean, we're hungry for that, so
Yeah.
I think, and that's just my opinion.
yeah.
But I think it'll do really well.
I would love to get first run films here and be able to really create an energy. And the other thing that, you know, I have friends that have run the Sundance Film Festival and things like that. And in my younger part of my career, I lived in LA and worked for some movie producers doing projects. And I really feel like if we could get education involved, and we want to do a film lab there as well, where we could get kids and bring in guest instructors and that, and teach them about film and editing and the arts and things like that. And then once a month, I would love it if we could do, all these kids could get out and they could film and create their own films, and then once a month, we show these films. And I think film is an extremely important medium because it can just relay so much, so,
That's great.
yeah.
Any questions, council?
Just, I was curious about the impact of the state highway, just because it seems like the setbacks are a little snug. And should this transportation study come back and say you can't do phase two,
I think the discussions that I've had with ITD, well, first of all, ITD, they throw out a traffic study. We couldn't get the traffic study done in time for this, so I've been able to work with Morgan that and with ITD as far as getting the approvals to move ahead. But I actually wanted to have an access off onto Boydston from our project, and it was just too much of a fight. And but in talking with ITD, they're looking at us like with the traffic, and I kind of argue the point, like, there's a heck of a lot of traffic that comes out Black Hawk and all that there, and so we're not the sole instigators of the traffic there. But they said that, but on the other hand, I said, well, let's look at, we want to do a good project, so if there's ideas that maybe we have to put in a turn lane, or we have to do some improvements there, then let's look at it, because we want to create something that's good. And that right-of-way, that right-of-way on that Boydston there, it's a huge right-of-way across there. And I don't think with our setbacks, we're that close. I mean, if you went over there and you walked our pathways and you look at our property pins, we are extremely far back. Yeah, I mean, you've got that borrow pit, and then we're back beyond that, and then we have the pathways, and it's quite a distance from the road.
So how far from the path to, say, the movie theater?
You know, I think they might be like, in some parts, maybe 10 feet, but that path
It's
is over.
There's space for a 12-foot snow storage and utility easement around all parcels. The setback in the commercial zone is less, it's zero setback, but there's actually, all the structures are set back at a minimum of 12 feet, because they have snow storage and utility easements on all parcels. The right-of-way is also like 80 feet here, it's a sufficient right-of-way if a turn lane needed to be incorporated.
Well, on West Lake, it's 100 feet. Their right of way is 100 feet.
On West-
So, on West Lake, when you get to the end of Boydston and you take a left, the state highways,
West
the
Valley.
state highway is 100 feet wide. So why wouldn't they recommend 100 feet for this section?
You're not talking about West Valley, you're talking about Lake Street up there,
Right.
where the highway, it's not 100-foot right of way up there. It's like 50.
Okay.
Sure. Nathan Stewart, Public Works Director. So, to answer your question, Mr. Sowers, the right-of-way on Boydston is 80 feet. And so ITD wouldn't be requesting or requiring any additional right-of-way. In the discussions that I've had with ITD, to get 100 feet of a right-of-way as a requirement for any kind of relocation of the highway has never even been contemplated. The 80-foot right-of-way is the anticipated right-of-way that we would be able to get, because we have the eminent domain the rest of that. And there are a lot of restrictions. So I think in front of, on Boydston there, where Dirt Boydston intersects, it might even be 150 feet, 75 on either side of the center line. But the conversations we've had at this point with this project and ITD has been, we want to make sure all accesses comply with ITD's requirements for access, and the accesses that they've proposed may or may not comply with that, and so that's why we've been hesitant to allow that. And our access management policy specifically states that all accesses for new development has to happen off of secondary roads, and since they have access to that secondary road, the real question then becomes, do we have any intersection improvements that need to happen? And I think what we've conveyed is that there's adequate space to make those intersections.
I just, you know, I just remember from our tour, our discussions about, access points and how the limited number of access points on the road is a selling point for the state highway. And, you know, if we don't add an access point, but we increase traffic, are we gonna be jeopardizing our future trade?
I think it's a really good question to ask, and what we've done so far has been navigating any new accesses on Boydston to comply with ITD rules. So if an access would comply with ITD rules, then the consideration of that access kind of gets elevated. But we still have a policy that says if you have secondary access off of a secondary road, that takes priority. Because even if you could meet access standards, if you have a way to get your vehicles and your traffic into your property from the secondary road, that's always preferred. So, and I hope I'm answering your question.
I'm just concerned with their portion here, just how it's written. You know, because I don't want them to be in a position where they're married to phase 2, and then ITD says no, and we're sitting here looking kind of, you know, like we approved something before it was really allowed.
Right, and I think at this point, that discussion is at a level where their existing right-of-way in our downtown may be 50 feet wide, so offering up a right-of-way that's possibly 80 feet with many, many less restrictions is an improvement to what they currently have.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Any other questions?
I'm still not quite clear on the phase 1, phase 2, I missed that.
So for phase 1, can be approved or can be constructed and receive certificate of occupancy, so those structures can be occupied to be the storage unit, all these live work units, and the first 3 micro townhomes, because it's not a significant increase of traffic for 7 residential units and a storage facility. So the remaining commercial for phase 2, prior to occupancy, so not even prior to building permit, but ITD has said just prior to occupying those buildings, we want you to financially assure or construct, well, determine if you need to financially assure or construct any improvements for this intersection for turn lane. So if that comes back this winter, because that will be going through that in December, we discussed, they would be modifying this development agreement and specifying any of those improvements, and then they would have to either financially assure those with us. It'll all be presented to you in a revised development agreement to include those if anything comes up that they require, like a right turn lane or a left turn lane.
Okay.
But from the comments received from ITD, they felt comfortable moving forward with this plan.
Okay, yeah, I was just kind of curious about, it's kind of presenting two different things of
And let me,
the commercial and residential happening concurrently, and then the phase 1. phase 2
and that's by design. I mean, the whole thing is by design, because when you look at development and building out a project, you have to kind of look at like, okay, pick the battle a little bit. And so with a phasing plan, the one reason we did not design a building that had all commercial on the first floor with residential above, then we felt that just from previous experience on projects, they're much more difficult to finance. Plus, for the consumer, it turns it into a condo, which condo financing is so much more difficult. And so by basically still meeting the requirements of the commercial percentage and the residential percentage, and balancing that, we were able to separate the buildings and do the micro townhouses, which allows better financing, so that, you know, different income levels could afford that. And then also what we're trying to do is, the movie theater and the restaurant's probably the most complex part of it, because we have to do all the construction docs, it's gonna take us longer to design it. So we tried to come up with a phasing plan, like, because we wanna go now on everything, but it doesn't work that way. So you gotta kind of, okay, well, how are we gonna, you know, the storage building, that's probably gonna be an easier building to build, okay? The micro townhouses, those are gonna be a little easier to build. And so we kind of tried to come up with a scenario that still gets us to the finish line, but allows some flexibility.
Actually, yes, per your comment, Colby, I didn't specify this earlier when I was talking about it. Because these are live work, there's no requirement that any of these commercial buildings move forward at the same time as these do. These are sort of separate because they have the commercial component inside. And the first 3 micro townhomes are allowed to go forward without COing any commercial buildings for the first 3 for phase 1. And this is also considered commercial,
Storage units.
the storage units. So if they were to complete this, there's enough square footage here that they could receive certificates of occupancy for the rest of these without constructing any of this based on the square footage.
And so I guess, can you walk us back through what the assurances are to
Yeah.
the completion of phase 2?
Oh wait, for
So,
phase 2.
Yeah, because there was this, you commented on, that we don't want to just sit there undeveloped for however many years.
Sure.
That was what are the assurances that phase 2?
So,
will be completed in a timely manner?
the
I know you went over this, but.
No, it's okay, it is really complicated. So, I guess I may have, we don't want this to go, we have a code section, so 3.4.04 requires that you have mixed-use development in a commercial area, CC. So you can't have a residential-only project, you have to have a project where at least 50% of the ground floor is in this mixed use or commercial aspect. So what we didn't want was for this project to go forward and be only residential and not meet this 50% mixed use commercial requirement. So for these, it's not a guarantee that we get these buildings specifically, but it's a guarantee that we get something so that the mixed use code section is met. There's enough square footage here that it's like equal to the square footage ground floor. So you could get a C of O, a certificate of occupancy, for these 12 units by just constructing that building. So there's no guarantee that we would get these. There's just a guarantee that we would have equal square footage in commercial and residential. Does that make sense? So the way it's detailed in here is that you can either get 12 certificates of occupancy based on this square footage, or if he chose not to build that, he could build these instead. You could get 3 certificates of occupancy for building this, or 6 for these 3 lots. So 6 here, 6 here, 6 here. So it gives him some flexibility in what buildings get C of O'd first, so far as timeline. But the idea with their phasing plan is that it'll likely be this one first, which then they could get C of O's for these. There's sort of 2 different things here. We have a mixed use guarantee in the development agreement, just assuring that we're going to do that mixed use code and have equal square footage in residential and commercial aspects. But then there's a separate one, which is the timeline, which says that only certain things can be constructed before we have this transportation study back from ITD.
Well, did your question answered?
Yeah, I think that helps clarify it.
Okay, super.
And if you need more time, I mean, that's always an option if you don't feel comfortable with this right now.
How big is the
2,800 square feet, approximately 2,800 square feet.
how many seats? Yes.
It's actually designed as 2 stories, 40 and 40, but it just depends, you know, on the second one, but, yeah.
I'm just kind of curious about the 29 parking spaces for those 3 commercial areas.
And I think there'll be some overflow to some of the other areas, but we've met the code requirements. I think we've exceeded the code requirements for the parking, but I'm really hoping that we get people walking there, we get people biking there. But that is.
They have, I agree, they've more than met the code requirements for parking, but I also think that they're a little bit overparked. So these are micro units, they're pretty small, and he has a little over 2.5 spaces per unit there, so I think that there could be some, overflow from the commercial into this area. There's also 14 parking spaces over here for the storage. I don't think you're gonna have 14 people parked at the storage unit at all times. So there is some overflow from here into these other areas for parking.
Anything else, council?
Yeah, I'm curious about this, when you mentioned this additional parking area and parking area.
Yes,
uh,
absolutely.
I've, on all of our maps that we show what property the city owns,
I've never seen
that lot
this
has never,
Do you want me to pull it up on the GIS or we attach to the internet?
and I'm just kind of curious, that one's totally out of the blue. And
Yeah.
I wonder how many other properties
Parcels.
that we,
I think it was highlighted in our last, when
it was,
So it's this, there's this piece is ours. So this is the common area for Broken Ridge, so they will have some amenities in here. This one is ours, and then right across the street is this long one. So, right here.
Kurt, do you want to comment on this? You snuck in here too.
Again, Kurt Wolf, Parks and Recreation Director. That additional piece on the opposite side of the road was tied to previous development and meeting their parks requirement. The Parks Department's been kind of managing it for noxious weeds over the years. And when the developer approached us about needing to meet a parks requirement on this one, we took a look at it, and the fact that a lot of this area has increased in density, and now is probably a logical time to really pursue looking at that. So it was a good fit as far as this project goes, and an opportunity for us to start looking at, what is it gonna take to make some minor improvements, and then long-term, really what can we do out there? So we kind of got the ball rolling. As far as other pieces similar to this, we have those all in the GIS database. I'm happy to meet sometime and go over that, or even give council a presentation if need be. Because there are a few other small parcels.
Anything else, council? Kurt, take this.
Oh.
This is for Stephanie's husband.
so what was that, back to the question about that potential additional parking that's tied into future park development? You mentioned something early on about more parking.
So the parks requirement, so there's a requirement that new subdivisions contribute to our parks. And so we've often been working with sort of in lieu proposals or in lieu fees, because we don't want necessarily new parks to manage. So we already have a lot of city land over here for a park, so instead of donating more land for a park, they were talking about creating a parking area in this corner, so that when this is developed into playfields or frisbee golf or whatever it is that we develop it into, that there is parking for the public to come and use it, and that would be over here in this corner.
Anything else, council? This is a public hearing. Did anybody sign up to speak? Did you sign in?
I forgot to sign up, man.
This one is.
Did you sign in?
Yes, ma'am.
Come on up. I'll get the list here and stuff.
Hi, I'm Bob Lorimer. I live at 204 Broken Creek Street. And we're in that first building as you come in, trying to get everything done. And if you haven't been over there to see the landscaping and stuff, it's wonderful. Now, I'm a little concerned, and I had a question, because I signed up that I do support this, and in addition, I'm kind of off topic. I'm one of those guys that scream squirrel if I get too far off. But the across the street where they're putting in the new storage building, they've really done a good job over there. And I think that's going to be a tremendous asset to the city. But where we're at the mailer that I got reflected a turnoff still off of Boydston in there, for the simple fact that in that first building, you know, we haven't mentioned anything about the kids that have already moved in there. And you're going to be pulling a lot of traffic off right there by those paths and where a lot of children are going to be. And there's going to be a lot of traffic coming in and out of there. And so I would ask you to reconsider that if there's any way possible. There's already a culvert there. There's already a thing to turn in that location. And I would ask that you kind of reconsider that. I would have written in, because the one that was mailed out showed the turnoff going in to the commercial area. So I apologize for not doing that earlier. But the concern is in that and I don't know, and I'm excited to see what the traffic study is going to say, because I've been out there watching the school bus, and West Valley is extremely busy. And I think if you take a little pressure off with it coming in, and the other way too, I think it'll make a significant difference. And that's really all I was concerned about. And the other part too is with parking around the buildings, and I don't know what the code has per building, but you know, there's 3 bedrooms, 3 baths in those condos. And some of these here are owned, and they've got 3 different occupants. There's 3 vehicles there. And I foresee some issues with that, but overall, I think it's a phenomenal project, and I think it's going to be really nice when it's done. But I would ask you to consider those things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and welcome to McCall.
Thank you.
Dwayne.
I'm next door to Bob. I'm in 206 Broken Creek. And my biggest question is parking.
In what?
Is parking. Right now, currently, with just the residents that we have living here right now, if you have 2 vehicles, somebody's parking in the dirt. And I was just doing dummy math when you were adding up. And I think I had like 73 parking spots that they were gonna be bringing in, but yet that didn't consider any of the commercial use and everything else that's going in there. What I can see happening is that everybody's gonna be vying for parking spots, especially coming around this corner, right here. And I just wanna make sure that we have adequate parking, because to Bob's point, most of the condos that have been sold are all 3 bedrooms. Most people have 2 vehicles, and right now we're in the dirt. So when you consider this, I think the applicant is fine. I like the idea of the commercial side, but I can just see us all vying for a spot to park our vehicle. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else for public comment? And was there any written comment received? No? Okay, super. Sir, come on up again. The applicant. That'd be you. There we go. Can you speak to any of the queries that the gentleman came up with?
Well, yeah, first of all, in our first application, we did try to get access off Boydston, and I think Bob makes a good point, and I was for that. And, you know, and I think the traffic study's gonna show more.
Yeah.
And I think we've committed to that through our development agreement, so. And then as the parking issue, we're still working at possible ways to get more parking. I think once the project's more developed, I think we'll have more parking, because we might have opportunities back over in here and by the storage unit there. And like Morgan had said as well, we're overparked on some of the micro townhouses, but, you know, we're trying to do everything we can to get more parking in, but we meet all of the requirements with this parking. And also regarding the parking of the existing project of the townhomes, that was already a preconceived design, which was already approved with the parking and everything, and we finished the build out of it. Now, if we would have started with a clean slate, we would have done things differently. So it's kind of making the best of a situation that was already started, so.
I'll just add that these existing units do have 2 parking spaces per unit, so the garage and the driveway. I just counted up in my staff report, the applicant is proposing 93 parking units across this new development. And the removal of this access here was based on the city-approved access management policy and based on taking access from secondary streets versus major arterials when possible.
Is there any way to have 2 accesses off the same
Here?
street? No. Up there where they have the first access, where's the first access going on? I'm looking. Oh, is that where they are right there?
So this is an access off
Yeah.
West Valley, this is an access off West Valley. The private street comes down this way, there's a pull into the parking area here, and there's a pull into the parking area here. Is that what you're asking?
So are there 2 access points?
So
That
you-
one and the other one?
You can turn in here or you can turn in here. But I think that the public comment was related to the fact that this used to be an access,
Right.
proposed access onto.
It meets all the requirements. And thanks for explaining all of that, both of you. That because of the price of housing, we're seeing multiple families buy into a 3-bedroom unit. So 3 families buy in, they each have 1 vehicle. Is that gonna be a problem? We heard one opinion that could be a problem on one of your families.
So these live-work units, they have 4 parking spaces per unit. These have almost 3 per unit up here. Of 3 per unit would be 36 and they have 34. Code doesn't require 3 per unit. But they are almost at 3 per unit here and they are at 4 per unit here, if that answers the question.
No, I agree that what's passed is passed, but you gotta recognize, okay, now that's changed. People are buying some of these townhomes that are already approved, and the assumption was 2 parking spots, is that correct, for a 3-bedroom? Was that?
These are all 2 parking spaces and are they all 3
And we
bedroom?
heard from one of our tenants that perhaps we're going to see a lot of occupants in these 3-bedroom with 3 cars because there are 3 families. So we're not trying to regulate that or change it up, but I'm just asking a question. As you ask for permission on the roof stuff, what do you think about that comment that we heard from one of the owners? Because it all kind of fits in. There's gonna be, there's gonna be a lot of demand for parking.
If you start having more parking than what's already proposed here, so this is already, I think, almost overparked. By the time you have in the garage, the driveway, the other parking, it starts being more and more asphalt, less and less oriented to the pedestrian, and this is a pretty walkable neighborhood. It is geared toward the pedestrian with lots of bike paths and the idea to bike and walk and commute within this neighborhood. It also has bike paths and walkways that tie into this neighborhood over here, so it's walkable for this neighborhood to get over here to these commercial areas as well, without bringing a car in to park over here.
And then also in what Morgan was mentioning, the 2 parking spaces per unit for all of these here, there's all this additional parking here,
So you got some street side parking.
street side parking, which is over and above the 2 per unit. And then with our new design is, like Morgan had mentioned as well, we added additional parking. So,
It might be a little difficult to see right now since a lot of this is still under construction, so it's not all developed out at the moment.
So I would like to see, as the future goes, because old folks like us people like to drive their cars. But I'm hoping that younger generations like you folks are not so wedded to your cars and have your butts on bikes or other modes of transportation. I mean, I think we should incentivize different types of multimodal transportation than cars everywhere. That's what I would, that's how I think. But perhaps in the future, more people are gonna be riding buses. We've got a great bus system, it's free. A lot of people are riding bikes. I rode bike today, freezing my buns off to that seminar at the bank. And I just think that people might not need 3 or 4 or 5 cars, and if they do need extra vehicles, you've got some storage units there. So, anyway, that's just my.
Well, and I agree with you. I agree with you, and one of the points of development is trying to reach this kind of harmony of good design with parking, and parking lots are ugly. I mean, they are, and if you start designing projects to parking lots, so, and we're on the scenic byway, so, there's a lot of elements that you're trying to hit here and trying to make it a good looking project, yet still, be able to get the parking, and so I felt like this was probably a good, by adding the additional parking in and creating this mixed use, I'm 100% that I'm hoping more people ride their bikes, and I'm hoping that it's kind of a combination of both of those issues.
Any other questions? Council? Thoughts? Or we still have the guys up here? I'm gonna close the public hearing, thank you. Gordon? Okay. Council, what are your thoughts? Tom, I'll start with you.
I think it's a great project. Parking is on the property owner and many purchasers. I don't think it's good. It's cool.
Are the mics on, sir?
Yes.
Couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry. I said it looks really good. I think the parking is is more on the purchaser of the condos and the property owners and the developer. It's not, I don't think it's our deal. It's part of our decision. I think access and having a expandable area, and from what I'm looking at, it looks like there's a lot of expandable area that can turn into parking lots or other stuff, parks and things, so I think it looks great.
Thank you. Bob?
Yeah, the only concern after listening to all this, I have, if you want us that don't live there to come to your theater, I think you're gonna have a problem with parking. It's nice to say, and I ride a bike all over town, but not in the middle of the winter. So if you want me to come to a movie at your theater, I see we're gonna have problems. Where am I gonna park my car? But I agree with Tom, that's the free market system, and if you think it'll work, I'm willing to give it a try.
Melanie?
The condo association that is next to it, and partially responding to what you were talking about earlier, Bob, with, possibility of 3-family zoning a condo. I have seen this quite a bit in town, just with my real estate business, and oftentimes those 3 families are not there at the same time. So I get the whole idea that people are sharing these things, but I also find that the association has to be responsible for what they're selling and how they're managing what they've sold in terms of parking, because this separate development along the side of this is meeting all of the recommendations and exceeding them based on what we put out there in planning. And I am seeing a lot of snow storage and amenity space for the condominium association, so I'm wondering if there's room to grow there, but realistically, I do think there's gonna be some management issues there in terms of parking, and it just has to be addressed.
Colby?
Yeah, kind of share similar thoughts as everyone else on this. And I do agree that it is, I mean, it's up to the property owners to deal with these parking issues. And to kind of speak to Bob's concern about, it's a little bit different than creating, all residential area where you are putting in a commercial attraction that people will be driving to. And, I see that it's fine to take the perspective that it's the property owner's issue until the cars start flowing out on the West Valley Road, parking on the road, and then it becomes our issue, and it becomes an enforcement issue. It will happen, there's not enough parking in there. If you're gonna have a movie theater, a restaurant, and all this other great stuff, in theory, and by the books, there are enough parking spots, but it's a commercial venture down in there, and it's a concern about, like, you get into safety too. What happens if there's a fire in one of these and it's completely full of cars? I mean, there's very little access, not a lot of room. It's kind of concerning to me on some of those issues. And outside of that, I think it's a good development. I think that it incorporates a lot of the stuff we need. I'm disappointed that the micro homes, or whatever they're calling them, are not deed restricted and taking advantage of our housing incentives. But yeah, it's going to be the property's owner problem until it's our problem. The cars are going to get parked on West Valley. That's going to be an issue.
Anything else, council? Ready to make a motion? Comfortable with making a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion, we approve planned unit development, general plan application PUD 19-03 and subdivision preliminary plat application SUB 19-06, the associated development agreement as recommended by the McCall Area Planning and Zoning Commission, and authorize the mayor to sign all necessary documents.
Second.
Motion to approve the plan unit development general plan application PUD 19-03 and subdivision preliminary plat application SUB 19-06. The associated development agreement is recommended by the McCall Area Planning and Zoning Commission and authorize the mayor to sign all necessary documents. Has been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? May I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Sowers,
Yes.
Councilmember Holmes,
Yes.
Mayor Amen,
Yes.
Councilmember Giles,
No.
Councilmember Nielsen,
So,
So Bill, does that
So what was the vote?
3-2
It passes, it's approved.
passes? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, reports. Annette.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, Annette Spickard, City Manager.
Speaking up. I couldn't hear you.
No problem.
Thank you very
That's what I'm here for.
Oh, you're it.
I'm in charge of the page. Yes, you can, having tell your friends to watch it.
See you guys.
Hi.
We met you.
We've met before.
Have we?
Yes.
How you doing? Good, sir.
Not what I have Alzheimer's? No.
Okay,
So I have my September report there in front of you. I did add in the first item, the economic summit that happened earlier this week because I knew that would be fresh in your minds from all of us attending that. And I wasn't sure if you wanted to make any comments about that. In addition to that, I did a career presentation to Heartland High School, which was great. By the way, Kurt, they suggested a covered skate park for year-round use, so.
Did they want that heated as well?
Oh, yes, and they're willing to pay $5 each time they go into it. That was
Did
their
their parents
proposal.
agree to that?
It's 500 years.
Yeah. But anyway, a really wonderful program, a great group of kids, and I really enjoyed myself. And so if anyone is interested in doing a career talk with them, they do them, I think either once or twice a month with different people across the community to come in and talk to the kids, so it's really fun. I attended my first board meeting through McCall Community Center as follow-up to their request to you some month or so ago. And I attached a document they gave to me to share to you, it's in the packet, about the use of the building. And I believe several of you also met with Jim Fouché Fauché, I think it is, who's a consultant hired by Idaho Parks and Rec to talk to us about the potential for what they call Kokanee Cove project at Ponderosa State Park. They're doing a feasibility study for how to look at funding it privately. And so I attached the project description there in your packet as well that they gave to me. We continue to work with the library board on
Annette, excuse me.
Oh, excuse me,
I
sorry.
didn't get to talk with Mr. Boucher or Fauché, so I'd like to.
Okay, he had told me that he had emailed all of the council to schedule meeting times with each of you, so. Okay, well, I can,
Okay.
I'd be happy to forward his contact and get you guys connected, no problem at all.
Thank you.
We continue to work with the library board on the library expansion project and have turned our focus, not away from it, but in addition to it, now seriously evaluating the museum site for the park's relocation, which you'll recall you all gave us direction that you thought that was your preferred choice for that program to be moved out of the annex building. So we're getting into the details of that, and you'll hear more about that shortly. And then I have a little note about my office hours. I will be gone at the end of this month to go to a conference, and then I'm gonna take a little bit of personal time to go see my little granddaughter who's turning 1 already. So I'm very excited about that. And then a reminder from Human Resources that next Wednesday in this room from 8 to noon will be the Employee Wellness Clinic, which if you're on the city's insurance plan, you're also welcome to participate in. And you can get your flu shot and a health screening and those types of things. And then lastly, our communications staff will be working on updating all of our snow in the city material to reflect the new program that you all recently adopted for us to do the snow removal in the downtown core this winter. So.
I love the name Snow in the City. I think that's beautiful. And then for the screening, the health screening, do people need to be fasting? Because I know they draw some blood if you want your lipids, etc.
I believe it's not required,
Okay.
Although I believe they are asking people to schedule a time if you're gonna do the full health screening and not just the flu shot. So you should have received an email with all that information from Tracy, but I'll make sure that gets forwarded on. You did not receive that.
I'll forward it now, ma'am.
You'll forward it for me? Okay, great.
Super, I'll call that. Occasionally.
Oh, okay, from Bobette, it would have come from
Yep. Okay, thank you. Any questions for Annette? Super, thank you, Annette. Let's see. Who's next? I think it's Kurt.
Rick.
Rick.
Rick Stein, Airport Manager, thank you. Good evening, everyone. some of the things that have been going on in the airport in September is I've been working with Do Aviation in order to build, to lease to them space to build a hangar right next to my office space. It's approximately 20,000 square feet. It should bring in about $5,800 a year in revenues, according to the calculations. And currently, we're just negotiating between the airport and Do Aviation on some of the terms. So I hope to be bringing a successful lease for your consideration here in the next month or two. Item number 2 on the film location agreement.
I got a quick question.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Number 1, is that, are we gonna cover that on the 25th at that meeting, the Dinehard Area 1 or 2?
Well, I'm going to be discussing it more in detail. I don't believe that the lease itself will be ready by October 25th, so I will bring that to the next meeting after it's all ready to be brought to you.
I guess what I'm getting at is kind of jumping the gun, getting a lease agreement before we discussed Dinehard 1 and 2 zone for.
Yes, and that's all will be on October 25th.
All right.
So I have a question about Do Aviation. What do they do?
Oh, they're the well-loved aircraft mechanics at the airport. They're currently in Hangar 103, that's where McCall Aviation is. And they have a little hangar in the back part of that. And you can fit about maybe 3 small airplanes into that space. And they're looking for a bigger hangar area to get more airplanes inside. He's talked to me about possibly hiring more mechanics in order to take on some more work. And I think it'd be a real advantage to the city and to the airport in order to have him be able to build his building and expand his business.
I'm glad to know he's a local guy and he's going to expand his business. That's terrific.
Been around for quite a while. He was in the Pioneer hangar for a while.
Super. Thank you.
On item number 2, the film location agreement, well, it just turned out that I have that later on in the agenda as a business item, and if it's acceptable, I'd like to just wait till then to discuss that issue.
Perfect.
The Gem Air lease item number 3, Gem Air, they provide not airline service, they provide flights into the backcountry. And they've been at the airport for 3 to 5 years, I believe, and they're already renting during the summer, during their busy season, space in Hangar 100, which is where Kurt's office is right now, and next to my office. But they wanted to go to a year-round lease. So I've been negotiating with them and working on a 3-year lease with them. And I've got it scheduled right now for the first meeting in November in order to bring it in front of City Council. The Pioneer, number 4, the Pioneer Hangar update. Just wanted to let everyone know that on September 28th, the Idaho State Historical Society voted to accept the application as a historic building. And the next step now is to go on to the U.S. National Park Service to see about getting the historical designation, making it a national historical designation. So I'll keep you informed on everything that happens with that. And number 5, the taxiway realignment project. So far, everything's on schedule with that. And the last milestone that has been completed is the previously completed environmental assessment, which I believe was 2005, was accepted by the FAA, so we don't have to do that. They're also still working on the environmental parts of it. There's a small amount of, they're estimating between 1.5 and 3 acres of wetlands that need to be mitigated, so they have to work with the Army Corps of Engineers to see what's acceptable. They've already asked me, and I've asked Kurt, if there's any city parks that could use any additional trees in them, and the FAA will pay for them. So I'm working with Kurt on getting him some more trees.
You love trees.
We'll take them.
And that's all I have. Do you have any questions?
Any questions for Rick? Thank you so much, Rick. Nice report.
Thank you.
Bessie Joe.
Hi, Mr. Council. Not a lot to report, just a little bit on lake option tax. Our collections have leveled off a little bit. We are still going to be able to fund everything this year and everything on the contingency with the exception of the library expansion project. However, a good portion of that will get funded, so everything, all of the receipts through August has funded all the projects. So everything that we get in September will go to the library, but I do not think that we'll collect $149,000.
You're probably right.
So, but it should be sizable. So our licenses and permits continue to come in pretty much daily. I could ask how many of those new businesses to date were vacation rentals, and 14 to date new vacation rentals are on the books.
We have a lot of new businesses, interesting,
Yes.
fun businesses.
We have a lot of new businesses.
That's awesome.
So, continue to get lots of vendor permits and catering permits, lots of activity throughout town. And we're gearing up for the election for our 2 seats on council. That's what's happening in the clerk's world.
Any questions for Bessie Joe? Thank you, Bessie Joe.
Thank you.
Good job. Ines, you're gonna substitute for Michelle?
Oh, I'll try. Okay, so in community and economic development, unless Delta or.
I'm
Megan
happy
here,
to, if you'd like me
If you
to.
want to help me out here.
I'm happy to.
Do you have that?
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Would you like me to try?
Yes, that would be great, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and Delta Janes Economic Development Planner. For the notable items in the department report for community development are that the Urban Renewal Agency, in response to the request for proposal for local housing development on the Davis Avenue parcel, received 1 proposal from the housing company. They are going to work with the housing company to refine the proposal to get some units on the ground in as many as possible.
Now, where's the housing company from?
They're out of Boise.
Okay.
They are the ones that also did the Springs
Yeah.
project.
Super.
And so Catherine Oldenburg is a real resource there. And she's really excited about it. I sat next to her at the Economic Summit.
That's wonderful.
On October 1st, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended a suite of local housing code updates to incentivize local housing. They recommended those for approval to you. I don't know the exact date that'll come to you. It'll be a public hearing, but it should be soon, either at the end of this month or early next, I would expect. GIS, we're doing a lot of field work. They're still digging in the ground, so we're still locating things and getting those mapped out. Building permits continue to be up from previous years, as are the planning and zoning applications. Under economic development, you can see the grant report is attached. We received a couple of grants for the library expansion project recently, totaling $200,000. The public art Lardo Bridge project was dedicated and installed September 11th. And the Public Art Advisory Committee is now 7 members, meeting monthly instead of quarterly like they used to. And then the Historic Preservation, they were pleased to announce the nomination of the Pioneer Hangar that Rick just told you about.
Any questions for Delta, Michelle? Delta, thank you so much for stepping up.
You're welcome.
Eric McCormick, Golf Course Director. Yes, the weather has not been real conducive to
Yeah, snow.
golf. We finished September kind of wet and cold and started October the same way, but staff-wise, we're holding steady right now, and we kind of regrouped and we cut down, I don't know how many dead trees this week that we've been getting pointed out to us all summer that have been there. So we're getting a lot of tree work done right now. Hopefully, the weather will change back so we can do some, we're supposed to warm up to where we can do some overseeding and stuff on fairways to try to get that wrapped up for the fall. We did we got some LOT money for some more Incamac covers that we put on the greens, so the enough coverage for 3 new greens have arrived. So we'll determine which greens we're gonna go, and that'll put us up to about 13, 14 greens, I think, that we'll be covering in the fall. So I'm hoping it warms up enough, because the staples to hold the covers down are kind of hard to drive into the frozen ground as it is right now. Been kind of fighting, we still have the irrigation pressurized, although we haven't used it other than the bathrooms that were out on the Aspen 9 actually flush off of irrigation water, so we've had to keep those pressurized. So last night we had a tarp over the building with a heater in there to keep it from freezing up. So normally we aren't having to fight that while we still are pressurized, but we blow out around the 24th, I think.
So is that about when you stop golfing, when people stop golfing?
We go, most years we go past or to the end of October. I think our season says to the end of October. This year, it's, I think the 31st is a Thursday, so if the weather is really nice, we'll probably go through the weekend. We kind of play that by ear with staff as to what the conditions are, but right now we weren't open yesterday. We've been off and on, but tomorrow and the weekend look really good, so I think we'll have a lot of people that have not been able to play itching to get out, get another round or two in, so.
Any questions for Eric?
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks very much. Chris Burton.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, Chris Curtin, Infosys Manager, with my monthly report. An update on the fiber project. The groundwork is all completed. There's a couple of junction boxes that still have to be installed, but the vast majority of that work is done, and we should be moving forward with pulling the fiber in and terminating that fiber, which will give us some communications to some of those disparate buildings, PD, water treatment plant, things like that. I'm excited that the contractor Circle H has been a very good partner in this project. I've been very happy with them. We purchased some new switches. Switches are a distribution device. Think of it as a super intelligent splitter. They're replacing the core switches. There's 3 core switches back here in the server room that service the whole rest of the city as far as our internet and access to resources, servers, things like that. The old switches are end of life, and it was time. They were 7 or so years old. General replacement policy for IT is about 5 years, maybe 6 if you're lucky. We got 7 out of them, so that's kind of nice. We went to a different vendor called Meraki, which is actually a division of Cisco, and they were a little less expensive, which was nice, but they also offer some nice features, and we should get a little boost of speed. Not that it'll be dramatic, but people may see some of that. And I have been working with Linda Finance. We are working on designing a program that will help us allow people to use credit cards for payments. I expect to see that on your council agenda here sometime in the next 3 or 4 sessions. Our goal is to roll that out by January 1st at the latest.
That'll be a nice service.
It'll be great. We're going to bring you some options as far as how we handle things like convenience fees and things of that nature. We'll look for some guidance from you for that. That's about it.
Any questions for Chris? Super, thank you.
Thank you.
Meg? Okay, she was here briefly.
Okay.
Okay, Annette, you're up.
I'll try to fill in on this one. Meg is in the process of hiring and filling in the staff vacancy. So I believe they're in the background check process. She's included the list of all the events coming up in October, Halloween season. In terms of the library project, they had a couple of public involvement sessions in September, and she notes here they had over 80 people attend those, they call them the World Cafe outreach sessions with our consultants, and the feedback that they received was incorporated into the consultant's presentation to the library board in late September. And so they're going back and fine tuning the programming of the interior based on that. Let's see, what else does she have going on here? Sounds like they've been doing training with their board of trustees and making sure that they are fulfilling their roles as a library board. And so that is a big positive because it is a little bit of a unique creature in how public libraries operate in Idaho. And she said that the McCall Library was found to be respected around the state and that the trustees are doing all of their required roles. And so that's a nice thing to hear when they get out of the area and meet with their colleagues, that people look to them for, as a positive example of how to run a library system. That's awesome.
Any questions? Super, hope she starts feeling better. Kurt? Kurt, before you start, can I tell you something?
You bet.
There is a piece of wood or a slat on the boardwalk that is no longer connected to where it used to be.
We just saw that today.
You saw it today?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yep, no, thanks, yeah, we had a couple of screws pop out. We're about to go in there and tighten up a bunch of stuff. We had a lot of, wood was very wet when it arrived, so.
Yeah.
But thanks.
You're welcome.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Kurt Wolf, Parks and Recreation Director. Few highlights, fall, winter, and winter rec programs, registrations. So far, things are looking great. Pre-registration for winter programs is looking really well. A lot of the programs are already full or near full. A couple highlights, Tara and Stephanie implemented these no school fun days to try and assist working parents on some of these, Fridays that the children don't have school, but daycares aren't open, and just trying to offset that. And then the first one was last week. Tara, with the assistance of Tyler Padgett from the Parks Department, took them all down to an orchard and then on to the hot springs and back, and it was really well received, so.
How many kids went?
Full van. I didn't take a head count. I was there when they returned, but they filled the senior citizens bus, so.
Wow, that's a lot of
In one
kids.
of our vehicles. So it was a good program, well received, just fun to see them capitalize on those opportunities. Not much in special events. We had the annual senior wooden bat tournament, had a couple teams out of Boise in addition to 2 from McCall, and I think there might have been a couple more from surrounding areas, but again, well received. We kind of closed up our season out at the softball fields. Parks overview and staffing. We have finished the job descriptions for the 2 park leads positions in conjunction with the downtown sidewalk maintenance program. And those have been advertised starting this week. So we'll really start hammering that on social media, the website, and possibly radio ads, and to try and get those positions filled in time to, prepare for snow removal. Hopefully well before snow flies. We have a lot to do to get ready. Other than that, wrapping up capital projects and maintenance items. We'll be off and on down at Riverfront Park, continuing our efforts down there to revegetate and clean things up. We are gonna utilize some of the clump willows that'll come off the airport to stabilize the shoreline and bank and soften some of the riprap work we did last year. Met with Fish and Game down there to try and work towards creating some fish habitat as well. So hopefully we have a chance to get down there before the grounds start freezing. So let's see, other than that, we started on restringing the Christmas tree in our Roberts Park today.
Did you get new lights?
We did. They're in the shop, ready to go. We've got a lift coming next week to put them up, and we're about a third of the way up getting the old ones out right now. So that's about it right now. Parks crew's busy getting things winterized and projects wrapped up.
How about Northland Marina?
Still, we did get some news back from the title company. It was good news, and it's a slow process, but we're plugging along. Yep.
Any questions?
Do you have your snow removal route plan begun yet?
It's definitely begun. Eddie just tried to schedule a time in the next couple of weeks with Streets Department to start walking that and further refining that. We really hope to get those two positions filled quickly so that they can be a part of that as well. I think there's a huge value in having all the staff really understand that before it's covered with a blanket of snow. So yeah, we're working hard on that. The equipment is, some of it is here. I think we're receiving another piece on Saturday, so we're sitting well there.
Are you housing the equipment in the annex?
Right now, it's all over the place.
Everywhere?
We can't access the front of the annex at the moment.
Okay.
So we've got some over at the museum, 10-day, behind the shop. But once they get that east end of Park Street open, that equipment will be in the shop.
Anything else? Thanks for
Yeah.
your work. Justin?
Good evening, Council. Madam Mayor, Justin Williams, Chief of Police, providing the monthly report. If you look at personnel changes, the first item, we're continuing to accept applications. We are still 2 officers down at this point, working diligently to try to get those, but there just aren't any applications coming in at this point in time. So later on in an update, we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation to you folks. Grant update, the SWEAT grant being the e-ticket will go into effect probably by the end of the month. We have training October 21st for all the officers, and it looks like at the end of the month we will be going live with that program. So being able to scan driver's license, puts the data into the computer and spits out the little receipt citation. So it will, in essence, reduce our citation issuance time from about 14 to 17 minutes to anywhere from 4 to 7. So a little more efficient, as well as with the courts. Community events, the officers, several of them, I believe there were 4, worked the concession stand for the homecoming game at McCall Donnelly High School. We do that every year for homecoming so that others can enjoy it, and it's a good thing for us to get out there and do those. So every year we do that, and we had 4 people that were there this year partaking in that. October 27th is the National Drug Take Back Day, so we will be advertising and participating in that as well. It'll be held at the police station. We used to partner with St. Luke's on that and do it at Albertsons, but with the reduction in personnel at St. Luke's, they're no longer doing that, so we're still just going to advertise that we do that. We do that every day at the PD, but we'll get out the advertisements and such. So that is what we have. Calls for service are listed there. I believe it was around 251 for the month, so it was a busy month.
50.
Questions?
Any questions for Justin? I don't know how you guys handle all these phone calls. I mean, that's a ton of phone calls.
It just depends on what it is
Yeah.
and how long it's going to take and how many people are here. It's a little easier on day shift typically because Dallas and I are here. If we're not having to flex and go to nights, we're here. So normally we'll have one person that's on duty and he and I go and assist on that as well. It's when we're on night shift and we only have one person and they're on one call and we get 5 more stacked up that it gets bad. So,
It's like you have to have your phone stuck in your ear and just walk around with it.
it's your radio. That's our phone. That's where it all comes from.
Very
And it is actually stuck in your ear. Yeah,
Any questions for
among
Justin?
other things.
Thank you, Justin.
Yes, ma'am.
Nate?
Good evening, City Council, Nathan Stewart, Public Works Director. Quick overview of the downtown core project. Things progressed slower than expected in September. We had some weather issues. Contractor had some logistic issues with delivery of materials and some other things. But needless to say, tomorrow they will start paving the north half. They're planning to do that through the weekend, so we may see paving activities extended to Sunday. Hopefully not, but because of the weather, they can't start paving until the weather warms up. So I was out there today getting a debrief. I had a big meeting with the crew on Wednesday to see where we're at. Sunrock's committed to finishing this project even if it takes until Christmas. So that's their quote, not mine. But I'm very optimistic that we're gonna have good weather over the weekend to get some paving done. Traffic control is a very sensitive issue, and so we're working diligently to try to make that better with some of the work going on in Phase 2A, which is on Park Street here. There was a death in the family of a major foreman that's working at Knife River, and so they had to shut down for a few days this week. They didn't progress as much as they wanted to. But that road will be opening Monday, just in time for a third contractor, Track Utilities, to show up. They'll be starting work on First Street between Park and Park. Park Street intersects First in 2 different locations. That's the undergrounding of overhead utility work that's going to begin. And the reason we're starting that this year is for a couple of reasons. One, to try to get out of the way of the contractor that will do the finish work on Park Street, but also because we've got a window here where we can get work done, and the settlement of trenches over the winter is always a positive thing. So very busy time in the downtown core. Pavers are going down. I actually took a picture of the first section of pavers that has the 2 colors. It's not pretty at this point because there's a lot of materials that are all around it, but I think in the coming weeks you're going to see a lot more paver activity happening. As I've noted here, some of the lighting will be installed in late November. Some of the lighting on 2nd Street will not be installed until the spring. That's because a commitment date of 8 to 12 weeks from the supplier quickly changed to 16 to 20 weeks. And so we felt like assembling light poles in the First Street parking lot in January was not realistic. So, any questions on the downtown core?
Nathan, on First Street, are you gonna do any rehab of the street itself, even though it might just be temporary? Because of potholes and the street's a nightmare, as you know.
Sure, yep. So at the intersection of Lenora, there will be some additional paving work that goes on there. All of the disturbed areas that happened between Park and Park, that's some stormwater infrastructure that was installed. That will get repaved. Our streets department is responsible for pothole repair, and so we will be doing as needed cold patch repair in that area. But First Street is not scheduled to be completed until 22 or 23, sorry, 21 or 22. Take a year off in the downtown and generate some money to do some more work. So that's something we're just gonna have to keep abreast, and if the streets department has to come in and do some significant patchwork in between, we do have funding in our streets budget to do that, so we'll look at that.
I think First Street was on the list of streets in the lot.
Well, it still needs some rehab, whether it's used from other funding sources.
For that, just
Yeah.
pointing out that fact.
Nathan, are we in charge of filling potholes on the highway stretch through town right now?
We are not, and unfortunately, knowing that this pothole at the corner of Lake and 3rd has become a significant issue, I reached out 2 weeks ago to ITD, and they assured me that it would be done, and they alluded to the fact that it would be done last week. They said they couldn't commit to it, they said soon, so I'm very surprised that it hasn't been done. I know they worked on some culverts south of town, and that maybe their priorities have shifted to that, but tomorrow,
Is my first day where I'm not totally jam-packed with meetings, so I'll be doing some follow-up phone calls to some of those agencies to see where they're at.
I was also wondering about that cut into the highway from what looks like our project.
Correct?
And that is not filled appropriately.
Right?
I'm wondering if that is something that we are responsible for, or if the highway department will fill in that.
No, Knife River, our contractor for Phase 2A, has completed that work and they will be paving that, so.
Because that's a real hard hit.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah, I've seen kind of a variety of things happening there. Cars turning south off of Park Street kind of accelerate as they're going in there and it pulls the gravel out. So our construction crew's been on them saying, hey, look, you've got to maintain this better. ITD inspectors were out this week too, so hopefully they paid them a visit as well. So we'll follow up with that tomorrow and see what they're doing there and make sure that that's happening. There will be a second cut into the ITD right-of-way next Wednesday. That will be out in front of Ice Cream Alley, not Ice Cream Alley, Veterans Alley. They'll be installing a new sewer manhole, so things are still gonna get a little worse before they get better, but certainly in the core, paving starting tomorrow.
There's light, there is light.
Yeah, the cold weather we just, received, I think woke up a lot of contractors in town, so we're anxious to see some real positive improvements, not necessarily in the weather, but in the production. Just looking through my report to keep moving. I had a great meeting with our consultants on the facility study. We're still giving them information. They're putting together some ideas. We've also started to incorporate some considerations for any fiber utility materials and equipment storage. We'll see how that plays out. So I'm right now it's just basically providing information to them, and then over the next couple of weeks, then they'll be coming back with us with draft ideas and concerns, comments about limitations and ability to provide for that need on that property.
Are there other locations being considered in this study?
They are not. And I guess I would add to that this is more of a short term, like less than 10-year kind of lookout. And that's based on what we see as realistic funding. But certainly if we get into this report and I work with the council and you want us to go for it, then we can do that.
It just seems like it would be worthwhile, especially since there's two entities that need new shop locations. How can we find one location in two places?
So, Mission Street, plugging along slowly, but we did get a email just today or yesterday in the evening. ITD has given our consultant preliminary approval to move forward without the paperwork, so that they can get their surveying work done this fall. Talking with Nick Zaninovich, I do envision that the state and local agreement will be on the late October meeting, but I think our surveyors are gonna get started before that meeting. So that project is finally getting kicked off after a long delay. Corridor study, I had a meeting just yesterday with that group. We're starting to get down to brass tacks about what the costs are and what we're negotiating there. We've pared the project way back from what we originally envisioned. We assumed that ITD wanted to do a significant amount of survey work on their right-of-way, which they don't know a ton about. But I think we're at a point where we're into something that we can actually fund. And with the available funds in District 3 discretionary funding, and I'll be meeting with the city manager early next week to talk about what our funding options are for that study. So, Chris Malvich and I attended the American Public Works Association National Conference. It's the first time I've ever attended that conference, as well as Chris. I don't think anybody from the city of McCall's ever attended that conference except for maybe Levi Brinkley at one point, and Annette. Right, it was Annette's.
Before I worked here.
Yeah, it was Annette's guidance to do that. One of the first chances I've had in my career here at the city to attend a formal conference of that scale. Tremendous amount of discussion about asset management. Tremendous amount of discussion about the future of unique pedestrian mobile facilities that are located in your right-of-way, like scooters that you see, e-bikes, those kinds of things, and some of the challenges that cities have faced. It was very interesting. And then also kind of a good check to see what we're doing in Public Works. I felt very proud of the work that we do. Some of the snow issues that we have and the things that we've done. I met with Henke, our Snowgate manufacturer, and reaffirmed some of their commitments that we're doing. They're looking at coming in this winter and doing some videoing and checking out how we operate, because we're really a test case for a lot of this technology. Streets is moving along fine. We're getting ready for winter. We're officially transferring back over. We committed a good bit of time in September to helping out both golf and parks on some of their things. So despite our limited staff, a lot of our streets crew only has some small windows to use their personal leave before they get locked into not using it. So our staff was a little bit less in September, but still managed to get a good bit of work done. In distribution, water distribution, just completed our substantial completion inspection today. It was done over the phone, but we have a lot of good information there. So that project at Jasper is wrapping up, and we'll be doing some final completion work there. Next week, the contractor will be back on site. And in treatment, I think I've alluded to this, that we're looking forward to presenting a check to the City Council on the November 7th meeting. The VFD project is done, and things are going well. I even looked at our electric bills, and we're saving money already. So, any questions?
I just have a question. Eric, you've got a significant knapweed problem on Reed, so we might have to talk with Kurt and see next year if we can attack the knapweed. I have that in my notes on Nathan's presentation.
Where did you say it was?
It's off Reedy on one of your berms. Quite a bit of knapweed. I think it's on the south side. I
Okay,
can show it to you.
okay, because there's some knapweed there that we pulled and there's a bunch of purple flowers.
I know the difference.
Okay. I'll check it, I thought we had it.
Anything else for Nathan before he gets down? Great report, Nathan.
Thank you.
Oh, did you have it? No. Okay. Okay, I think we're done with department reports. Thank you. Does anyone wish to make a public comment? This is public comment time, that I usually forget. None? Thank you. Now we can move on to the Airport Advisory Committee.
I'm bringing to you Agenda Bill number 19-218 concerning the request to appoint Mike Weiss to the Airport Advisory Commission. His term has expired and he's reapplied. His position was advertised in the newspaper for the 2 weeks as required by city code. We had 3 people who were interested in actually serving on the Airport Advisory Commission. They were, of course, Mr. Weiss, Gary Kasseri, and Carrie Freeland all applied for the position. The committee unanimously recommended the appointment of Mr. White, reappointment of Mr. Weiss to the Airport Advisory Commission. So the staff recommendation is to reappoint Mike Weiss to the Airport Advisory Commission for a 3-year term that will expire August 30th, 2022.
Any questions? How many people are on the advisory committee?
Currently 5.
5. And it's really a shame that we can't get all of the voices who are interested. I mean, it's wonderful you've got 3 applicants. Our art advisory committee expanded to 7.
Mm-hmm.
Am I?
Let me I'll introduce it, okay, and then Bessie Jo can catch up here. Originally, when I brought this item to the Airport Advisory Committee, one of their questions was, can we expand the board from 5 to 7? So they tabled the recommendation, they tabled choosing somebody to be on the committee and directed me to go back and research what it would take to increase the size of the board from 5 to 7. To get some assistance, I asked Bessie Jo if, what's going on. She went to the meeting and she knows way more about the subject.
So I attended the airport advisory committee and talked to them about what it would take to expand the committee, which would take to revise their bylaws. Also, I looked historically, and they haven't always had such good fortune as to have so many people apply. So there's always a risk in increasing your membership whenever you have a vacancy, and it also causes additional issues with quorums and such. So when I spoke to the committee, I recommended that they leave it at 5 and then invite the other two out, whichever two they didn't appoint, to attend and to give their input as non-voting members.
So that's a good idea. But it's just, you just hate to turn away volunteers.
No, I certainly don't.
Any questions?
What was the process for determining the board interviewed these two applicants?
Oh, yes, all three of them that were there. Mike Weiss, of course, is the chairman. And Mr. Kassiri and Freeland also attended the meeting. They provided their bios and spoke to the committee.
Anything else, Eric? May I have a motion, please?
Make a motion to reappoint Mike Weiss to the Airport Advisory Committee for a 3-year term to expire August 30th, 2022.
Second.
A motion to reappoint Mike Weiss to the Airport Advisory Committee for a 3-year term to expire August 30th, 2022 has been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? May I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Holmes?
Yes.
Councilmember Giles?
Yes.
Mayor Amen?
Yes.
Councilmember Nielsen?
Yes.
Councilmember Sowers?
Yes.
Thank you. Public Art Advisory Committee.
Mayor, Council, and Delta James Economic Development Planner. As you know, I'm the staff liaison to the McCall's Public Art Advisory Committee, of which we have a few members in the audience this evening. As you might remember, at the Council's July 26th joint work session with the Public Art Advisory Committee, the Council remanded the Downtown Public Art Project back to the committee for artwork selection and provided some general guidance on what you'd like to see for that project. So the next step in proceeding with that project is to issue a call to artists, which is basically a request for qualifications. And a copy of that is provided in your packet. The artist call for applications does a few things. It provides some general guidance about the project itself, the expectations for the project. It outlines a timeline and then describes a selection process and some qualification requirements. So I'd like to go through those briefly. So the first thing is in the project intent. If I can draw your attention to the bulleted items on page 1. This describes the general intent for the project without being overly prescriptive to the artist to allow for their creativity still. So those include that the design process would originate from community input, that the project would contribute to 2nd Street as the city center and a flexible event space and gathering space, that the artwork would highlight and celebrate McCall's unique history, character, and/or environment, so that it's place-based. That the artwork be interactive and/or functional to maximize community engagement with the artwork. That was something that the Public Art Advisory Committee heard loudly from you during the work session. And then finally, be durable, low maintenance, and appropriate for McCall's climate. So those things are kind of the sideboards of what we look at and be vetted through the selection process. Also, in the next paragraph, it describes some examples of the types of artwork that might be appropriate. First, it states that all media will be considered. Of course, it does still have to meet that durable, low maintenance, and appropriate for McCall's climate benchmark. But then it describes opportunities within the 2nd Street scape, including artwork incorporated into sidewalk paver surfacing and/or concrete seating walls, functional elements such as street furniture, bike racks, or overhead or gateway elements. That's just to give any artist that's looking at this some examples of the opportunities that still exist for integrated artwork within the Second Street streetscape. Any questions about the project intent?
Nope.
The eligibility, this was discussed with the Public Art Advisory Committee, and they would like to keep the net pretty broad to invite qualified artists to apply. So the eligibility is open to artists or artist teams who are adults over 18, living within Idaho or within Idaho's contiguous states or provinces, so anywhere that borders us. Or artists living somewhere else that can demonstrate a connection to McCall specifically. Although all of those will be considered, there still would be a preference given to Idaho artists if they're qualified and feel it can meet all the benchmarks for the project. Any questions about the eligibility?
Questions? Nope.
The timeline is there listed on the bottom of page 1. I think really the only thing to note here is that the artwork wouldn't be installed until the summer or fall of 2021. So that, and it includes several community engagement benchmarks, which I'll go through. But that will give over a year for the artist and the community to interact with the Second Street streetscape without art there first. And they'll see the built environment as the artwork designs are being proposed, which I also heard as a desire from the council. This is a community input-driven design process similar to that we used for Lardo Bridge. It is illustrated by this chart, and I'm not going to go through all of this. The star is where we are now, but it shows the process here, and really there's two key moments for community input. The way this works is the qualifications are submitted by artists, and the artists will be chosen based on their past work and their qualifications and their demonstrated ability to facilitate community input that's represented in their application. So we'll select the artist without knowing what they're going to create. But just like Susan Madasi did with the Lardo Bridge project, their first task will be working with the community to define design ideas and artwork placement. So they'll do community outreach to do that. And then they'll come up with at least 3 design proposals and locations that will then be further vetted to the community in our usual ways through presentations, hands-on or in-person presentations, as well as online surveys and promotion. Any questions about that? And then,
So we're gonna get all of this for $60,000.
I hope so. I mean, noting that, I would expect that the budget that the artist will submit will show an amount of dollars going to that public input that will be taken away from the artist's product itself. We can always ask the artist if it's something that you like, or if there's something they really want to propose that would cost additional dollars, we can broach that subject at the time with the artist. But they will be tasked, for now, with keeping it within the allocated budget. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, it's just sometimes it's a lot to ask for an individual to do all of these things. And then come up with a beautiful piece of art.
Yes.
Okay.
To give you some perspective, Susan Madasi's project was a $50,000 project for Lardo Bridge. And it was the same selection process.
That was good value.
It seemed like it.
Yeah.
So to help with the selection of the artist, the Public Art Advisory Committee will be forming an ad hoc selection committee specifically for this project. We've talked about, they've directed us, staff to invite first the 5 members who volunteered to be part of the first round of the Downtown Public Art Project to participate again, but also then to extend invitations to representatives of at least one downtown business along 2nd Street, and then also somebody who is involved with the library at the head of 2nd Street. So depending on how many people want to renew and participate again, we'll have a selection committee, ad hoc committee between 5 and 7 members. Any questions there? So the Public Art Advisory Committee is asking for your authorization to issue this call to artists and invite applications. Should you authorize that, I will help with distributing the call to artists. We do that through local arts agencies, like the local versions of the McCall Arts Communities Council in towns around. We look to the state arts agencies to help us promote that, and to artist co-ops. And then there are also national listservs for artist opportunities that we use. We will do an effort here locally to distribute the call to artists locally, hoping that we can find one who's qualified and interested.
Any questions for Delta?
Anything you would like to add?
Good job. Covered it all very nicely.
Questions?
Just answered one major question, the how.
May I have a motion, please?
Make a motion to authorize the Public Art Advisory Committee to issue the call to artists for the downtown public art projects.
A motion to authorize the Public Art Advisory Committee to issue the call to artists for the downtown public art project has been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? Have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Holmes?
Yes.
Councilmember Sowers?
Yes.
Mayor Amen?
Yes.
Councilmember Giles?
Yes.
Councilmember Nielsen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delta. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you very much. Rick, the movie star.
I haven't got on TV, I haven't got on the movie yet. This was as part of the department report, the film location agreement. LWT Enterprises requested a location agreement in order to film segments of the television show River of No Return on the airport. I'll be bringing the agreement in a second. River of No Return is showing Sundays at 9 o'clock, that's Eastern and Pacific, on the Discovery Channel, and parts of it, some of the trailers I've already seen, you have seen, I have seen Sawtooth Aviation employees, their airplanes, and some scenes from around McCall. So in order to move forward with their filming on the airport, I brought Agenda Bill 19219, which was a request for approval of a film location release at McCall Municipal Airport for LWT Enterprises Incorporated, who has requested permission to film segments of the television show on city-owned airport property. They already have an existing filming agreement with Sawtooth Aviation, and they have been wanting to film on the airport. So the release, which is attached, run by the city attorney, and it has been approved. So what I would like to recommend is staff recommends to approve the location release between the City of McCall and LWT Enterprises and authorize the mayor to sign all necessary documents.
Any questions?
Have you ever seen this show?
Just some trailers on the internet.
I enjoy it also.
I don't have a TV, so I just heard some
I
guys talking
don't have
about
cable.
it
That's
in the Two Rivers Coffee Shop. They were discussing the show and how it was kind of different, I guess.
So the version we have, Rick, is real blank, like, when does it commence, when's the term, when does it continue through? I think I understand the property, it's our airport.
Oh, I apologize for the blank. I'll get you one that's filled in. For sure. Do you want to?
Well, I just want, do you know, like, how, does anyone know when it is? Is terms of this
The dates
agreement?
Yeah.
of the agreement, how long it's gonna be working.
When does it start, when does it end?
Oh, you know, I don't actually have that in front of me. I'm sorry about that. I can always bring it to, if you'd like to table it, I can bring it to the next meeting.
And they haven't already shot the footage, they're gonna do it?
No, not on the airport, no.
So, are they required to be on airport property when there's personnel there, or could it
It could be really any time that they really want to do the filming. They've, in order for them to be on airport property, of course, they have to have the agreement in place in order to do that, and that's what I was working on here. But they haven't filmed anything. I haven't seen them out on the airport, and I haven't seen anything from the television show, well, I should say YouTube, that shows any filming out on the ramp or the runway.
So, I mean, if we had to table this and revisit it next council meeting, that could delay, is that gonna cause them any heartache or problems?
No, we've been working on this, and I don't believe it'll cause them any problems. They'll just move the shooting schedule around to, they'll just move the shooting schedule around to do whatever they need to do.
Bill, what are your thoughts?
Madam Mayor, I don't, we focused on the language in the agreement. We actually can't tell, but we got some things out, and an addition at the end, but, I think so long as it's understood that they have to coordinate with the airport manager, I'm not sure it makes a whole lot of difference exactly what the timing is. I mean, that's your call, certainly, to know exactly when that is, but,
I didn't even need to know exactly, I just would like to know, are we talking like, it starts when we approve it, and Jackie as our mayor signs it, and goes for 12 months, is it 2 years?
Television shows are usually under contract for 7 years, but we can make it shorter if necessary. But I can make the date to be the day that it's signed.
But rather than have a multi-year agreement, if you want to limit it to a year or limit it to this fiscal year, you can certainly do that and pass a resolution and then that, or come back with another one.
What are your thoughts, Julie?
Be okay with it for a year, because you mentioned 7 years.
If the show never gets canceled.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there might be a season 2, who knows?
There's only one river, no return.
But there's that.
Newsflash. Leave the airport for that. So you thinking a year?
Yeah,
Contract?
that'd be okay with the year.
Melanie,
Hunting
what are your-
season will be about over.
I think it'd be nice to start with a shorter period of time and evaluate it after that period.
So what's your shorter period?
I would think it's a year.
Tom? Okay, so then council, can he go ahead and get the agreement, even though it's blank, but with the addition of a year timing, are you happy with that, or do you need it to come back?
I'm good with that.
Well, I mean, that we can do that, sure. Will we do that?
Okay, good, let's have a motion, please, and you have to add the 1-year term.
I make a motion to approve the location release between the City of McCall and LWT Enterprises, Inc. as amended for 1 year, and authorize the mayor to sign all documents.
Second.
A motion to approve the location release between the City of McCall and LWT Enterprises as amended for 1 year, and authorize the mayor to sign all necessary documents has been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? Have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Holmes?
Yes.
Councilmember Giles?
Yes.
Mayor Amen?
Yes.
Councilmember Nielsen?
Yes.
Councilmember Sowers?
Yes.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Police.
I am going to pass something out.
I'm not gonna pass out, that's fine.
It's my department.
I might need one too, sorry.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nat. No passing out, not allowed. Justin Williams, Chief of Police, again. Madam Mayor, Council. I'm here tonight to give you an overall summary of the summer and what it was like for the police department, the types of calls that we answered, the number of calls that we did, and kind of a state of affairs for the police department through these months. The sheets that Annette is passing out is a comparison, statistical comparison for the last 3 years, 2017, 18, and 19, for the dates of May 15th through September 15th. We chose those particular dates because that ends up covering most of the holidays that we have and runs through most of the summer, so it catches those high times that we have. So if you look at it, for the calls for service, we had an approximate reduction in calls of about 102 calls for service compared to 2017. There was a 103% increase in traffic complaints compared to 2018. So those are two of the things that stood out. If you look, you can see the chart on the left is the type of call that we had, whether it be DUI. These are just some of the ones that we picked out that typically stand out, that we have more of these calls than anything else normally. So you look, we had in 17, 31 DUIs, 25 and 18 and 21, and 19 disturbance calls remained about the same. Traffic complaints went up significantly in 2019. We're still seeing more and more traffic complaints that are coming through. The locations that we've talked about, it's kind of Pandora's box has been opened, and so now we typically get more traffic complaints than what we've gotten in the past.
So how do you define traffic complaints?
People calling in about speeding vehicles, people complaining about speeding through a neighborhood, those are traffic complaints.
Generally speeding?
Mm-hmm. Normally, yes
No
ma'am.
little ladies pointing at the sign on Willie?
No. No.
That would be me.
Yeah, no, that would be a suspicious person or a mental. One of those is how it be categorized. Parking complaints stayed about the same. Property found and lost during the summer, almost equal, 120 calls for service. So are there questions over the calls for service that we had, the numbers that we had during the summer? Nothing over that one yet? Okay. The arrests. For felony arrests, we had a 68% decrease over 17 and a 50% decrease over 2018. Misdemeanor arrests were down 33% respectively over 17, 52 over 18. And so if you look at that, most of our arrests that we had were for DUI and narcotics. Narcotics, the two primary narcotics that we see in the city of McCall are marijuana and methamphetamine. Those are the two. That's what we normally get. It is here. It's been here. It's something that is rooted in the society that we have today. So those are here. We do come across that quite a bit.
But it looks like your numbers in 19 is reduced significantly.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
There's an explanation for that.
I have a theory.
I bet you do. We'll come to it in a minute. So now, those are the arrest statistics. You go to the traffic stops and the dispositions of those particular traffic stops, 17, 18, and 19. Roughly about the same as what we had in 18. Citations were less and the warnings were up. Now if you look, you may say, well, the warnings and the citations don't equal. There can be multiple violations in one, and so we may issue one citation for the speeding, but we'll give you a warning on the tail light and the no turn signal, those types of things. And so they don't always equate. So that tells you the number of traffic stops that we made during the summer. I myself was responsible for probably about 150 of those. So it was kind of busy, kind of busy. So the arrests and traffic discussion, staffing levels have been pretty poor for us. Throughout the summer for the last year, we've been short on average 3 officers, patrol officers. And so traffic is where we get most of our arrests from. That's where we get most of the narcotics from. That's where we get the DUIs from. Other than traffic stops, our primary arrests tend to be domestic disturbances and assaultive issues. And so that discretionary time is when we run traffic. Discretionary time being when you're not already assigned to something else. If you're not already being called out to or dispatched to a location, or you're on a special assignment doing something. And so when you have one officer that's out, You have one person that can answer the calls for service, that can make an arrest, that can issue a citation. And so with limited numbers, you're gonna see reductions, and that's what we've seen. As a matter of fact, one of the days that I was on patrol on a Saturday by myself, I stopped someone that had a warrant for their arrest. Couldn't take them to jail because I'm the only person on duty that holiday weekend. If you take someone to jail, you're out of service for 2.5 to 3 hours, and so then the city's uncovered. And so officers have been very judicious in their decisions and their discretion as far as making these arrests. And so there are arrests that are walking away simply because we don't have the staffing or the personnel to do that. We're facing an issue with staffing, and we're trying to do things differently and think outside of the box. The problem with staffing is that law enforcement in today's society is not a chosen profession. Who wants to do my job now? Not very many people. It's always been a thankless profession, but now it's even more so in today's environment. And so if you look at that, the applicant pool that we have nationally has reduced. And so it's a matter of supply and demand. When you have police departments nationwide that a patrol officer tops out at $115,000 a year annually, it's difficult to compete with when you're in a small market. And so we've tried to go outside. I think we attended 4 university job fairs this year. We've spoken at the private academies in Boise and at the College of Idaho, and gone and given presentations, have gotten 0 applications from those particular endeavors that we've had. We're advertising on a major police website. It's called Police One. They've got an applicant job posting board there. We're posting on that. We're using social media. We're doing these things, and typically we may have 1 applicant every couple of months, and it's difficult to find the qualified applicant who's willing to come here. Typically with that, you look at what we're paying in comparison to what other agencies pay, and we've now fallen behind the county on the pay scale. And so we are behind them. They just recently got a 6% pay raise across the board combined with what their pay raise was last year. And so now we are officially behind them. And so they are getting applicants, we're not. And we're doing what we can. And so I'm very proud of the work that these folks have done. Being down, I'm proud of Dallas for what he's done as well, and the leadership that he's shown. We're humping calls for service just like everyone else. The morale is fine. The folks are doing good, but they have taken notice of the pay scale and the difference in what people are making in other locations. What the county is seeing as well, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, they're having several people that are leaving their location to go back down to the valley because the valley is paying so much more. Housing is cheaper in the valley than it is here as well, comparatively. You can only eat so much mountains, you know, and so it's a matter of finances. And most of the guys that we have here, most live outside of town. You know, it's what you look at in the prices, and you're very well aware of the housing situation. And so with all of those things, the totality of the circumstances makes it difficult to get someone. When we hire someone in, if they are not already post-certified, it takes us about a year to get them on the streets before we actually see them doing something on their own and they roll into the staffing model. And so right now being 2 down, possibly another in the next month, luckily we're in the shoulder season. So those are...
Sorry, Chief.
No, go ahead, sir.
What's our potential for reserve or auxiliary?
It's not.
There's nothing?
No, it's not. Most of the people that we have that would want to do reserves are officers that did 30 years somewhere else. Many of them are not certified locally. Reserve officers, that trend is going away because of the liability that's faced with it, and the part-time police officer coming out, it's very difficult to manage the concerns and the training concerns and those things, because they're not doing it on a consistent and daily basis. Most of the reserves come out once a month, and that is not enough in this profession to stay efficient, effective, and safe. And so most agencies have moved away from that.
So one thing, I've been really impressed with the training that you and your assistants, you guys have a really good training program.
Yes, sir.
I think probably better than some others. And I'm very proud of what you guys do on that. That probably contributes to the morale. We've had some really good people come and go.
Yes, sir.
Do you do like exit interviews? Do you have an idea of what? Are they all leaving to go to a higher paid law enforcement job, or is it?
There's not an exit interview that's conducted. Typically what happens, like with most of the employees, we've had 2 leave to go to ISP. The pay for ISP is substantially more than what we make, simply because of the fact that they get incentive pay. The incentive pay that they get is if they get a specific certification, they get a pay increase. If they get an increase for education, if you get an associate's degree, if you get a bachelor's degree, if you get a master's degree, every so often they get these bumps. If you get a relocation, if you're working New Meadows instead of McCall, even though you're still living in the same spot, I think it's another 6 or 10% that they get for that. And so you see that happen. They also have a wider jurisdiction, as well as the fact that with ISP, there are a lot more positions and opportunities for promotion. When you're in a small agency like we are with 12 people, inclusive of myself, the opportunities for promotion, growth, that job satisfaction window constricts. And so you have to make up with that, for that in other ways. And that's where the training comes in, is that we have a model that I believe in and that I believe is effective, and something that we've done is to identify particular areas that people are interested in, that they have a desire, a want to in. Give them ownership of that. We have people that are really big on DUIs. We have people that are more into narcotics. We have people that are more into community service. And so that's the training that they seek out. A defensive tactics person, a firearms person. Then they bring that training back and we train in-house. Not only do we train in-house, we're now going down to post and training during the post academy. We have our instructors that are going down to teach the new cadets. And so post has pointed to us as an example of a small agency that does it right. So that lends to job satisfaction and the retention. The last few people that we've had to leave have been for larger outside agencies with more money. One simply wanted to get back home to family. Had left, had come back, and had left again because a spot came open where he could be next to his family.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Is there any way that we can become more educated on the wage disparities between these different entities you've talked about?
Yes, Dallas and I are in the process of collecting the information. We've got a stack of data that's about like this, and so we're sifting through it, and I'm going to meet with Annette and talk with her about that. So eventually in the coming months, you'll get a study from us that's done, and I've done them for several agencies that I've worked for. And so it's nothing that doesn't happen everywhere else. This happens. If you stay at a level for so long, it happens and you get past. And so it's not unusual, it's expected. It just happened very quickly with this one simply because of the 2 large bumps that the county just recently got. And so that's who we compete with. But we are reaching outside of our area. We have someone that moved from out of state that's showing interest right now. And so we'll see how that goes if an application comes through. Social media has been very effective, but reaching outside of that and going on to the web and trying to do some things and being showcased. We were really looking at being showcased on this particular website, but it was $6,000 a month, and so that's cost prohibitive. So we went with the free section, so we'll see how it gets, if we get any bites off it or not, I don't know. So that is the staffing strategy that we have to try to overcome the issues that we face. Fortunately, we haven't been put in a position that our level of service has decreased, or officer safety has been compromised, or the public safety has been compromised yet. It worries me at times, honestly, it really does, but we will cross that when we come to it. So we're working on that very proactively. Code enforcement update, we've completed a rewrite of the job description It is being reviewed by HR as I speak. When Tracy comes back, it should be completed. Once it's completed, we'll post that. I've got a meeting scheduled with Michelle. We've been working on the job description together and trying to figure out exactly what this code person's going to do, how they're going to report, what the priorities and focuses are. Once that's complete, we're going to sit down with Annette, talk to her about it, and give our insights of what it is, and hopefully get the position posted by November, get them trained. We will send them actually to a animal control school. So one of the biggest things that the code enforcement has to do is deal with the stray dogs, the loose dogs running around. For years and years and years, they've done it without any training, and that's a huge liability on the city for having someone take care of a dog and try to throw a dog in the back of the truck that's never been trained on how to do that. And so we're going to remedy that. They're actually going to be trained and be certified. So we're looking forward to adding that personnel. So they should be, I'm thinking 6 to 8 weeks worth of training, January sometime, hopefully, full speed. Questions on code enforcement? Last but not least, the summary of basically what the summer was and what we're looking forward to. It was pretty much what it has been for the last 3 years. We're seeing more and more disturbance calls with the short-term rentals, simply loud noise disturbances. We get a lot of those during the summer. Congestion, traffic complaints, things of that nature. But overall, the visitors, the vacationers, the locals, it was pretty well behaved, pretty tame for the summer overall. We're going to be transitioning right now into the shoulder season, and so we're really going to look at the local issues, more of the traffic concerns, more of narcotics issues and things of that nature that are going on, something that we can turn our focus inward and work instead of just managing crowds. Now we'll look and see if we can manage and address some problems and concern areas that we have in some blight in some areas. And the e-ticket, as I said earlier, is coming online, so I'm looking, it's going to be interesting to see the citation issuance versus warnings. One of the neat things with this is that now the warnings will go into the system, so it shows that if someone else stops them later for the same violation, that they just received a warning 2 days earlier, and so it's going to be something to be utilized statewide as well. That's my summary. Questions?
Any questions? It'll be interesting to figure out this wage issue, because we need a police force.
We're getting it covered. We'll work. I appreciate your support and what you've always done for the police department and the community support. The outlook and the view, in my own personal opinion and belief, of what this police department is in comparison to when I arrived and what the overall feel and vibe of the police department was in the community has changed significantly. And people aren't always going to agree with what it is that we do, and we're not always going to agree with everybody else, but overall I believe it's been very positive. I give a lot of thanks and kudos to Annette for allowing us to do our job. She's been a blessing to work with. She's been wonderful to work for. She allows us the latitude to do what it is that we need to do. She believes us when we provide her the information. She supports us, and it's been fantastic. She makes my job very easy. So, got a great support network. Got great people working underneath me. Couldn't do it without them. So, and I thank you.
Anything else for Justin? Thank you. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Big audience.
Justin,
Okay.
You want me to get into the?
Yep.
Okay, so, the next, meeting on the 24th, the reason I asked Justin not to leave yet is because the work session at this time, is intended to be the Afton update and, the faith community and the folks working with, the need in our community, and Justin's been trying to help me,
He is coming. He
lead
responded.
that. Did he? Okay,
Yes.
good, I just wanna make sure he can.
Eisenbrook?
Yes.
Yes, he has responded. He will be here. He gave me a short blip of what he anticipates to speak to and things of that nature. He's currently out of town, but upon his return, I'm going to meet with him and handle it, so it is done.
Great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I won't be here, and Counselor Holmes won't be here, so. I'll that one. I think you've heard about everything else that's coming up that day, and then you actually special work session on all things airport on the 25th, so that should be good. I know Rick's been working really hard preparing the material this week and Friday that AAC members to attend, and we'll have our airport engineer Kevin from TIO there as well, so they should be able to answer questions and help Rick work through all this with you. Should be a really good presentation, and sorry I'm gonna miss it, I'll have to rewatch it on the webcast. Let's see. I don't know if there's anything else on here that specifically to point out, unless you have questions about anything. And of course, as we're nearing the end of the calendar year here, it's slowing down a little bit, and I'm sure we'll have things filled in for the future meetings here in December. And just a note, Bessie Jo's been good about reminding all of us internally, but I'll just point it out here in the meeting that your dates change a little bit in December because of the holidays, so just note that on your calendar.
So that's November, Bessie Jo.
November as well.
November is 7th and the 21st, so it's the 1st and 3rd. And also, I wanted to let you know that more than likely on the 21st and on December 19th, I'll have an alternate location because the Legion meeting is here. So
Okay.
sometimes they have their holiday parties, so
Yeah.
it might only be one of those dates.
So what's December's date? Is it 1st and 3rd as well?
It's the 5th, yeah, it's 5th and 19th.
Thanks. That's good to know. So, and January is
Maybe
back to
back
normal?
to the second.
Second, fourth.
Tree lighting on the 6th.
The 6th?
Oh, yeah.
The other thing to start
I tried to
thinking
hire him to
about
come do my
is,
tree.
in January, when you would like to have the retreat. So, last year we moved it up, instead of the 4th weekend, we did it, or the 4th Friday, we did it, I think, the 2nd Friday, or the 3rd Friday.
Because of Winter Carnival.
Because, yeah.
It fell on the first weekend of Winter Carnival, so we moved it last time.
So that's something for you to consider, yeah. And it'll be reflected on the next upcoming meeting schedule too.
Anything else, council, for staff? May I have a motion to adjourn, please? All in favor?
Aye.